Okay, guys, for this one, you're going to need this. It's kind of like what we did yesterday, but there's one main difference you can't miss on. And also having an orange piece of scratch paper is going to help too. You'll see why here in a second. Because yesterday I'd always put the comma and add. You're not always going to be adding, okay? So let's talk about x to the 8th divided by x to the 3rd. This time it's division. So I know you probably understand what common factors are in division. So x to the 8th means x times 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 x. And then divided by x to the 3rd, which means x times x times x. Well, even though I don't know what x is, when I'm dividing, I can do what's called canceling out common factors in the numerator to the denominator. So that goes away, that goes away, that goes away, and I can't take any more from here. So how many x's am I left with? I'm left with 5, so x to the 5th power. Okay, x to the 12th. So really, you have 8 of them. What can you do with 8 and 3 to get 5? I'm pretty sure you can minus them, so it's 5. And that's why sometimes you're not always going to be just adding. You're also going to be minusing. So that's going to be x to the 10th. You can just visualize what's going to happen. There'd be 3 x's left here, and there'd be 2 left here. Okay, so let's go do some problems. The first one's an easy one. I just want you doing this one without, just think about it. You take 16 minus 2, that's 14. Don't divide the powers, okay? Now, here's what you're going to be doing. You are going to make your 2 boxes again. Now, you're going to see almost all the problems have like a fraction line. You need to extend that fraction line straight across the whole problem, okay? And then you make 2 in these boxes. If you have a fraction line, you need to make a couple different ones. Okay, so let's talk about bases. Let's look on top first. I have a number base 5 and a number base 7. So 5 times 7. And then for letter bases on top, I have x and I have y. Now go look in the bottom, and there's another base, but there's no number base, just a letter base of x. Well, the thing is, I've already written down x. I don't want to write the same letter down twice. Okay, so we're just going to leave that bottom empty for now. So I'm going to put empty. Okay, here's what we're going to do. So 5 is to the 1st in a parentheses, so 1 times 2 is 2. 7's to the 1st, not in a parentheses, so we're just going to put a 1. Now x, how many x's do we have? We have 2 of them, here and here. So I take 3 times 2 to get 6, comma, and then there's going to be a 4 right there. So 6 comma 4 is what that says. Now I have to decide what I'm going to do with 6 and 4, whether I'm going to plus them or minus them. And here's how you're going to, some of you might already know, but here's how I determine that. I put a 6, make a circle, and then I put a 4. Now the x to the 6th came from the top, so I put a T, and the x to the 4th came from the bottom, I put a B. When I go from top to bottom, I minus, okay, every time. If they're both on top, you plus. If they're both on bottom, you plus. But if they have a top and a bottom, you minus, and you get 2. So I would have 2 x's remaining on the top. So, and then y, we have 4. 4 times 2 is 8. Anytime it's in parentheses, you got to multiply. Okay, so now 5 to the 2nd, I can figure that out. That's 25. 7 to the 1st, pretty easy. That's 7. And then x to the 2nd, I can't do anything with that, or y to the 8th. Now, you can't leave the 2 big guys. You need to times those, okay? So I take 25 times 7. That's going to be 175. So why don't you just cross that out and put 175, and that is your answer. 175 times x to the 2nd times y to the 8th. Okay, the next one, same idea. So look on top of your line. You have a number base 8, and then that's all your number bases you have on top. I know I have one on bottom, so I'll just put the 5 on bottom. Then top bases, letter bases, I have X and I have Y. Now on bottom I also have X and Y, but remember our rule, we're not going to write the same letter down twice. Okay? So 8 to the first, so it's all this is in a parenthesis, so anything that comes out of here, it's power SB times by 2. So 1 times 2 is 2. Now let's look at X's. Well, how many do you see? You see 2. So I'm going to have 3 times 2 to get 6, comma, and then that X is to the first, but it is in a parentheses. That's still in. I'm still in my parentheses, so 1 times 2 is 2. Everything, including the bottom, okay? So 6 and 2. So that X came from the top, and then my other X came from the bottom of the line. So from top to bottom, we minus, and that's 4. So that X will be going to the 4th power. Okay, now the Y, that's a 3, by the way. There's 2 of those as well. So 3 and 1, but they're both in parentheses, so they both have to be times by the 2. So 3 times 2 is 6. 1 times 2 is 2. So I got to figure out what to do with 6 and 2. The Y came from the top. The other Y came from the bottom. So 6 minus 2 is 4. Y is to the 4th. Okay. Then we have our 5 to the first, still in there in that parentheses. So I take 1 times 2, and that's 2. Okay, so 8 to the second, that's 64. And 5 to the second is 25. Because I can figure that and that out. Times X to the 4th times Y to the 4th. Now look at your 64 and 25. They're not on the same side of the line like these were. So if they're not on the same side of the line, just leave them. You're obviously not going to multiply them. I don't want you to divide them either, okay? I just want you to leave the numbers as they are if they're on opposite sides of the line. Okay, next one. Again, my writing gets somewhat sloppy on these. So here are your lines. Just extend the line so it covers the whole problem. So my number bases, I have a 6 on top. I have a 7 on bottom. And I've also got a 2 on bottom. For letters, I have X and Y on top. And there's also a Y on bottom, but I already have Y. Okay, so don't write it down twice. So 6 is to the first, so I take 1 times 4 is 4. And then the X, what I'm going to do, I'm going to take 1 times 4 to get 4. And that's the only X I have, so nice. Okay, and all this is inside of parentheses. Look at your parentheses. So anything that comes out of there, we have to times by the outside power. Okay, so Y, there's 2 Y's. I have 3. 3 times 3 is 9, comma. This Y down here is to the first, but this parentheses is still around that, so I take 1 times 4, and that's 4. Okay, now I got to figure out what I'm doing with 9 and 4. So this first Y comes from the top, and the other one from the bottom, so I minus. 9 minus 4 is 5. So Y ends up being to the 5th power. Now the 7th is to the first in a parentheses, so I got to take 1 times 4. That's 4. And the 2's in parentheses, so I take 1 times 3, and that's 3. Okay, so let's see which of these I can actually simplify. So 6 to the 4th, I can take 6 to the 4th, or 6 times 6 times 6 times 6. I get 1,296. That's on top. X to the 4th, I can't do anything about. Y to the 5th, I can't do anything about because I don't know what Y is. 7 to the 4th, I can figure that out. 7 to the 4th is 2,401. And then 2 to the third, 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. Now, we got three big numbers here, the 1,296, the 2,408, and the 8. You need to times the two numbers that are on the same side. So cross that out. So 2,401 times 8 is 19,208. And then these two are still here, but they're on different sides, so we don't mess with those if they're on different sides. Okay, the next one's an easy one, but it is kind of weird looking. There's the line. All these are going to have lines. You need to extend it. You don't need to extend it here. Well, I have a base of 6 on top, and then there's another base 6. Don't write it down again. And then there's another base 6 on bottom. Don't write it down again. The only base in the problem is 6. There are no variables. It's the only base I have. So I have a 3. There are no parentheses here. A 2 and another 3. So I got to figure out what I'm going to do with 3, 2, and 3. So I go 3, circle 2, circle 3. Well, the first 6 comes from the top. And the second 6 comes from the top. And then the last 6 is on bottom. So what I want to do is the two tops, if they're on the same side, we plus and then minus, okay, because we go to the bottom. So that's going to be 3 plus 2 minus 3 is 2. So that 6 ends up being just to the second power. Now I can find out what 6 to the second power is. It's 6 times 6. 6 times itself, and that's just 36. Okay, my next one. Extend that line. See how you have a couple parentheses. All your bases are pretty much in a parentheses, so you are going to have to times on each one. So my bases, what do I see? I see a base 7. I see a base 4, both on top. That's the only number bases. Variables, I have an X on top, and I have a Y on top. Now, I also have Y on bottom, but I already wrote down Y and X. I already have X too. Okay, so 7 to the set first, 1 times 3 is 3. So any exponent I put has to be multiplied out. 4, 1. 1 times 2 is 2. How many X's do you see? Oh, you see 3, don't you? So to the first, but in a parentheses, so 1 times 3 is 3, comma. There's another X, 3, surrounded by a parentheses, so 3 times 2 is 6, comma. There's a third X, which would be to the first, and it's still surrounded by a parentheses, so 1 times 2 is 2. So I got to figure out what I'm going to do with 3, 6, and 2. Okay, so this X comes from the top. This X comes from the top. And this X comes from the bottom. Okay. So again, we add the tops minus the bottom. So that's going to be 9 minus 2 is 7. So X is to the 7th. Now let's look at our Y. There's 2 of them right here and here. So to the first, but it's in a parentheses, so 1 times 2 is 2. And this is to the first. That's in a parentheses, so 1 times 3 is 3. So what am I going to do with 2 and 3? Okay, that's from the top, that's from the bottom. So when I go from top to bottom, I need to minus. So 2 minus 3 is negative 1. Okay. Okay, now negative exponents we're going to do something with tomorrow, but don't worry about it today. Okay, just leave it today. 7 to the third, you can figure that out. 7 times 7 times 7 is 343, or you could use your caret key. 4 to the second is 16, 4 times 4. x to the 7th I can't figure out, and I can't really at this point figure out y to the negative first power. Okay, so these two big numbers are both on top, so we need to multiply those. Okay, so 343 times 16 is 5,488. Okay, that's our answer. 5,488 times x to the 7th times y to the negative first. Okay, my next one. Base is on top. I've got a 6. That's the only numerical number base I have. I've also got an A, and I got a B, and then another A, but I already have A on top, so don't need it. I don't need to write it anymore. 6 to the first, so 1 times 4 is 4. There's 2 A's, so remember that. So 3 times 4 is 12. And then there's a 5, but the 5 is not surrounded by the parentheses. The parentheses stops on top, so I just write 5 down. I don't take 5 times 4. You got to look at what your parentheses surrounds. Okay, so 12 and 5. Okay, again, that came from top and then from bottom, so we minus, and that's 7. Okay, so A is to the 7th. And then B, 1 times 4 is 4. Okay, so I can figure out 6 to the 4th. It's not hard, so that's 1,296. And then A to the 7th is impossible to figure out. And B to the 4th is impossible to figure out. And that's the only big number I have, so that's circle. Okay, now again, extend your line. Now look at your parentheses. Take a look. I'm pretty sure, I think it goes over everything, the parentheses does. So number bases, well, I have 8. And then I have, that's the only number base I have. Now for letters, I have A on top, but I do have B on bottom. Well, I haven't written B down yet, so I need to get B down on bottom because that's the only place it's at. It's on bottom. So 8 to the first, so 1 times 2 is 2. A, I see 2 A's. Here's my first one, to the 4th in a parenthesis, so 4 times 2 is 8. And then 2 times 2 is 4, okay? So, let's see what we're going to do with 8 and 4. Well, that A is on top, and that A is on top, so they're both on top, so we plus them. So that's 12. So the A is to the 12th power. Now for your B's, I got a 1, but that's in parentheses. It's 1 times 2 is 2, comma, and then 2 times 2 is 4. So 2 and 4. Now they're both on bottom this time, so bottom, bottom. They're on the same side, so just plus them. So 2 plus 4 is 6. Okay, so B is going to be to the 6th power. So 8 to the 2nd, I can figure that out. It's 64. A to the 12th, I cannot figure out. And B to the 6th, I cannot figure out. So that is my answer. I'm going to look at the assignment and give you a heads up. Remember to extend your line here. Extend your line here. And by the way, that's a 3 right there. Power of 3. See what else I wrote. That's a power of 2. Okay. Extend the line right there. I want you to cross out number 6. Don't do it. Don't do number 6. Okay. Now there's a parentheses here, but x to the 3rd is not inside of it, so we're not going to take 3 times 4 there. Okay, and then right here. Okay. You'll have 2 x's, but they're both on top, and you'll also have 2 y's, they're both on bottom. Okay.